Since their discovery, viruses have sparked furious debate over their nature. Whether they actually count as life is a complicated argument that sits well outside the scope of our presentation.
But the fact remains that they are intricate biological molecules that have interacted with true life since time immemorial. As such, they have an evolutionary history that mirrors cellular life, but their origins are somewhat unclear.
Since they do not form fossils, we rely on molecular tools to see how they have adapted over time. So far, there are three major hypotheses that describe the origin of viruses, which we'll demonstrate now.
The first to be studied was the regression hypothesis, suggesting that viruses descended from early cellular life and through genome redundancy have lost the ability to live freely. This may have occurred through a symbiotic relationship between two autonomous organisms, whereby a larger host and a smaller symbiont live closely together and interact so both benefit. In viruses, it is possible that the symbiont became increasingly dependent on the host to provide nutrients for survival. As such, the genes involved in producing proteins for self-sufficiency are lost, since producing them would be a waste of energy. This would lead to the symbiont becoming an obligate intracellular parasite, a virus, unable to survive and reproduce alone. This hypothesis is a good explanation of the small and simple genome of most viruses, but there remains a large gap between the most complex viruses and the simplest cellular life, possibly too large to be accounted for by genome reduction, especially considering there is no known homology between viral and cellular genes, so no evidence of them dating back to a common ancestor. An exception to this is the Mimi virus, discovered in 2003 in France. This had an incredibly large genome for a virus, including some genes previously limited to cellular genomes involved in translation, folding, synthesis and repair, alluding to a regression, although this is yet to be studied. For these reasons, the regression hypothesis was the first to die out in the study of the origin of viruses.
Alternatively, viruses may have once been part of the DNA of primordial life. DNA contains mobile genetic elements or jumping genes. These are snippets of genetic material which can move around the genome and even be transferred between individuals. Examples include transposons and plasmids, and viruses have their own versions of these that facilitate their replication. There is growing evidence suggesting viruses originated before the last universal common ancestor of all true life, Luca. This could explain the similarities between viral genetic material and cellular jumping genes. Perhaps an ancient replication transposon failed to complete horizontal transfer, but was stable enough to exist and propagate using host cells. Therefore, this escape hypothesis places the origin of viruses as before cellular life specialized into the forms in which it appears today, suggesting why many refuse to call viruses true life.
Third and final main hypothesis that explains the origin of viruses is the coevolution or first virus hypothesis. Both the regressive and escape hypotheses assume that cells existed before viruses. What if viruses existed first? Recently, several investigators proposed that viruses may have been the first replicating entities. Kunin and Martin in 2005 postulated that viruses existed in a pre-cellular world as self-replicating units. Coevolution theory suggests that viruses may have evolved from complex molecules of protein and nucleic acid at the same time that cells first appear on Earth, and who have been dependent on cellular life for billions of years. Over time, these units became more organized and more complex. Eventually, enzymes for the synthesis of membranes and cell walls evolved, resulting in the formation of cells. Viruses then may have existed before bacteria, archaea, or eukaryotes. Most biologists now agree that the very first replicating molecules consisted of RNA. Maybe simple replicating molecules of RNA existing before the first cell formed developed the ability to infect the first cells. This theory could explain the fundamental difference between viruses and cellular life, but can't explain how these ancient virus ancestors replicate without host cells.
The origins of life fascinate both scientists and the general public. Understanding the way of viral evolution may help shed some light on this topic.
This is a focal point in paleovirology research, and just recently 2 new theories have been proposed.
The coevolution hypothesis, whereby small replicants lived alongside lipid-like vesicles, and the evolutionary pressure of food pushed these to merge, forming cells, or lead to the replicants feeding from vesicles making viruses.
And the chimeric origin hypothesis, proposed in 2019, this suggests that the replicability of viruses originates in the primordial genetic pool, with contributions from cellular hosts throughout evolutionary history.
More work needs to be done in studying paleovirology so that we may finally put this debate to rest.